Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening, everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. Thomas, and it happened to him in the city of Mazatlan, which is in Mexico, and at the time, which was in 2017, Mr. Thomas was 48 years old. And what I'm going to tell you here is my experience of a night when a dispute between creatures brought terror to my ranch, but I found out why it happened. But before I start my horror story, help the channel by giving your like. That's the only thing I expect from you. And now let's get to today's story, and it all starts like this. I live on a ranch, which is a place well away from the city, where I live a very quiet life with my family, but something happened in my life at a certain dawn that made me be very careful about the area where I live. Well, back to my story. What happened one day in the late hours of the night, I was sleeping normally, and around 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to the barking of my dogs, and the way these animals were nervous. It seemed that they wanted to attack something around my place. I wondered what was going on, and out of nowhere, I heard some kind of fighting growls, which would be some kind of animal confronting my dogs, and suddenly I heard the animals fighting fiercely, and I heard a lot of violent knocks on the fence of my farm. I got up from my bed quickly and went to look out of the kitchen window. When I looked through the crack in the kitchen window, I was startled to hear some noises in the bamboo fence again. My dogs just kept looking and barking at the fence, but then, and it was two creatures fighting, but apart from the fact that I was frightened by what was happening next to my ranch, I couldn't see what kind of animals were fighting, because the bamboo fence was high, and I couldn't see those animals fighting. But in the middle of that fight, suddenly, those two animals stopped fighting, but they kept growling very angrily, one wanting to attack the other, and then these two creatures stood up. And I couldn't believe what was happening, because these two beasts seemed to be standing behind my paddock, and you could see these two animals from the chest up, but I couldn't identify which animals they were, because the undergrowth next to my property was very dark at dawn, and these beings were looking at each other very angrily, and they kept looking at each other, and they were going to attack each other again. The fact is, I started to get scared, because while these two creatures were measuring each other, they were quickly looking around my yard, kind of looking for something, and then I saw that the eyes of these two creatures were shining like lights, and when I saw that, I got even more scared. Well, right after that, those two beasts attacked each other again, and started a fierce fight again, but the creature that seemed to be losing the fight ended up jumping over the wooden fence, and entered my yard. This animal fell anyway on the ground, but when he got up, he stood up like a man. Then I fell into reality that those strange animals were werewolves, and at that moment, the animal that was in my yard was still looking at the other werewolf that was behind the fence, and then he got on all fours and ran to the back of my ranch, and my dogs became afraid of these two creatures, and they barked from afar, so as not to be attacked by the werewolves. After all this confusion, it was getting dangerous for these creatures to be on my ranch. I quickly went to get my gun, which was a .36 caliber revolver, and at that moment I heard my wife getting scared. She asked me what those strange animals were around our property. I told her not to panic, so as not to wake the children, and that we couldn't drive away from our house, because the car was at the back of the yard, and that one of those beasts was inside our property, and that she'd better keep quiet, because those creatures were very dangerous. But I didn't tell my wife what those animals really were. I had my gun in my hand and went to look out of the window again, and saw that there was only one of those creatures there, and I couldn't find another one who has been beaten. The werewolf that was outside the fence started to make strange sounds, as if it was calling and looking for another werewolf. I didn't understand this very well, and to my amazement, another werewolf came out of the backyard. But this one was different from the other two werewolves, because as well as having a lighter coat, this creature had a more delicate appearance, and to me, it could only be a female of these creatures, and for sure, those two werewolves were fighting over this female beast. The fact is that the werewolf that was on the fence calling this female, what he did was break some of the bamboo and wood on my fence so that this other female creature could pass by, and as soon as she did that, they met and started sniffing each other as if they were dating. Well, I was scared by the whole thing, but I didn't shoot those animals because they didn't mess with my family, so I let it go because soon they disappeared into the woods. Even so, I didn't trust these beasts, and soon I was watching around my house and thinking about fleeing by car, but I didn't know if another werewolf was still hiding somewhere on my land, waiting for me to come out and take me by surprise. Anyway, when daylight came, I left my house, and I kept thinking about these werewolves that were surrounding my ranch, and I was worried that these animals might appear again, and near my ranch, there were few neighbors around to help in case of such a risk. But what I did was to put my car near the door of my house, in case I could run away quickly if these animals came back. I told this story to my neighbor, who had several werewolves prowling around our neighborhood at dawn, so that he would be on the lookout. A day passed and those creatures didn't appear on my land again, and at least I had a revolver and a car to escape with if I had to confront them. However, after 2 days of this situation, a friend of mine called me at the gate of my farm, and he asked me for a favor, if I could drive his niece and her boyfriend to the bus station with my car, because they were going to return to their city. I agreed, because he gave me some money to do it. But as soon as I arrived at my friend's place, my friend's niece had a boyfriend and he was all bruised, and looked like he'd been bitten and scratched by some ferocious animal, and the boy said he'd been attacked by a large dog that had escaped from a house. So I took the couple to the bus station, and after I had finished that trip, I went back to my house, and I went on with my life almost normally, because I was still afraid of having another experience with these werewolves, and I was worried about these werewolves at night. After 2 weeks, I ran into the rancher who helped his niece, and this friend asked me if I had seen any werewolves in the neighborhood. I said that I had. After this conversation, I began to suspect this rancher, and it was then that I had a flash in my mind that the boyfriend of my acquaintance's niece, who I took to the bus station, I suspect was him, one of those werewolves who fought that night, and maybe my friend's niece was that female werewolf who appeared in my yard, and the other werewolf was also interested in the wolf woman, but I could also be wrong. And this acquaintance of mine, who asked me to take his niece out of town, this guy lives on a property far away from the city, even from the area where I live, and he's a very strange person who dabbles in black magic, and maybe he's behind the appearance of these werewolves. But here's the thing, at least the werewolves haven't appeared anymore. I'm still wary of these creatures, because the boy and the girl could be 2 werewolves, but what about the other creature that fought with him? I keep wondering who he could be, or where he went, or if he could still be in my town, and in this whole story, to this day I keep an eye on the ranch of that acquaintance of mine, because he never came to talk to me again. And what do you think of this story, if maybe the couple could be those werewolves? Thanks for watching my video. A warning for you, I need your likes on the video. That's the only way I'll be able to bring more unpublished stories to the channel. If you don't give a like, the views of the video drop and it harms the channel. So take your hand out of your pocket and give a like, okay? Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and now let's get to today's story, which is about young Tulio. And it happened to him in the city of Icabaina, which is in the state of Bahia. At that time it was the year 2008. Young Tulio was just a teenager. And it all starts like this. I live in a very simple village in my city, but apart from that, what happened was that a friend of mine from the neighborhood, who was also a teenager, called me to catch some armadillos in an area far from where we lived. I only accepted this invitation because he sold these game animals to an old man who paid well, and the money we shared. I took my flashlight because I knew that we would be hunting armadillos until late at night, so my friend arrived at my house, and we immediately went into the forest to catch the animals, and we walked on foot through the dirt roads. We walked for about an hour to get to the place. Well, there were a lot of armadillos in that vegetation. We started hunting these animals in their burrows, and the hours went by, but they didn't care about the darkness, and all we could think about was the money we wanted to get for those animals. But when it got to about 11 o'clock at night, we had already caught 4 armadillos, so we decided to leave that place, which was very dark, as the batteries in the flashlight were already running low. So we grabbed our things, and as we were walking along a path through the vegetation on the side of a farm, where there was a barbed wire fence, while we were walking there, we started to hear some voices from afar, like someone or an animal was calling, but we didn't pay any attention to that, and we carried on walking. But as soon as we walked a little further, we heard the sound of something running in the woods, and that scared us, so we turned off the flashlight and ducked through the vegetation after hearing a few pops of something in the undergrowth. It stopped running, and through the bushes, my friend saw the shape of something. I looked to see what it was, and I was startled, and even though the place was dark, I could see that the shape was that of a large animal, but what was striking were the lights in its eyes, which looked demonic. This creature seemed to suspect that we were hidden by the darkness, and it began to walk close to us, and it was frightening, because this beast was breathing deeply and quickly, and it was very frightening. It was at this point that the creature seemed to get closer to us, and it was sure to find us. My friend took a chance and threw the armadillo we had caught to the other side of the bush, but it didn't go after our game, and it crouched down in the vegetation and stayed there quietly without making a sound. For sure this beast was at least 15 meters away from us. In that moment of danger that we were in, we began to hear the voices of some people from the farm next door saying, "He could be here." Then we saw that this strange animal became afraid of those voices and disappeared into the darkness. And as that strange animal left the area, and we didn't see him again, we took advantage of that and went under the barbed wire fence of that farm and entered the property, and our intention was to see if there was anyone there to help us get out of that situation. The fact is, we walked through a huge cassava plantation and kept quiet, so as not to attract anyone's attention, until we got close to the backyard of the house in that place, and I saw 2 men armed with rifles, and the way they looked, they seemed to be looking for that bug. But my friend suspected something, and told us not to go and ask those rednecks for help, because we didn't know what was going on, and those men didn't seem to have good intentions. But also, we couldn't leave that place, because the creature we saw could be somewhere hidden, and we'd run the risk of being attacked by it. After about 15 minutes had passed, and we were hiding there in the manioc plantation, a strange thing happened, because the beast that was in the undergrowth behind us was inside the yard of that farm. I walked slowly close to those 2 armed men. He kept throwing something for the beast to eat, but out of nowhere that animal started growling at those rednecks, and they kept pointing the gun in the creature's direction, and it looked like they were playing with the beast. Then we got the biggest surprise of the night. This creature, which looked like a monkey and a dog, stood up like a man, balancing on 2 legs, and at the time I thought it was a werewolf, but the creature got back on 4 legs after the landowner stopped pointing the gun at it, and the most impressive thing was that another man opened the door of a small barn on the farm. And this werewolf went inside the barn, passed close to the guys, and didn't attack them, and it seemed that the werewolf knew these people. With all this bizarreness, my friend and I turned back and ran away from that macabre place, and we walked hidden through the dark vegetation. As soon as we had walked for a few minutes, we arrived at a nearby village, and the worst thing was that it was already dawn and no one was around to help us. Well, at least we were calmer, and we decided to stay in that neighborhood until dawn, because to get to my house we'd have to cross other dirt roads. Of course, we weren't going to take any more chances. But apart from that, it's a good thing that it was day, and some people had already started to leave their homes, and the buses were circulating in the streets, so we took a bus and went back to our neighborhood, and as soon as I arrived at my house, I got a big scolding from my parents for having spent the night out. And what I did was tell him the truth, what happened to me, that I had to escape from a werewolf. The thing is, I didn't know what to do about the creature I saw on the farm, because it seemed that this creature knew those people. After that day, I never went armadillo hunting at night, because I know that these strange beings can be hiding in these dark and isolated places and waiting for their victims. Well, after that encounter with the werewolf, I warned my acquaintances not to go near that ranch at night, and over the course of a few months, I learned that the ranch belonged to a wealthy family, where 2 or 3 times a year they spent time at the ranch, and then they didn't show up for months, and this story of these people had something to do with the werewolf. Perhaps this mystery I'll never know. Thank you for watching the video, and if you liked the story, please like it and subscribe to our channel to receive new videos every week. Until next time. Fear Zone, your horror channel. Hello everyone, before I start the story, I warn you that I have a channel in the Spanish language, which is of werewolves too, and it is called Canal Noche Embrujada. And that was my message, and now let's go to today's account. Good night everyone, and this story is Mr. Nelson's, and this happened to him in the city of Dalapa, which is in the of Brazil, and at that time, that was in the year 2003, Mr. Nelson was 27 years old. And today I will tell something mysterious that happened to me after I met the werewolf from face to face, and the most serious was that a friend of mine suffered because of this creature. And it all starts like this. I lived in a very simple village in my city with my parents, and at that time, the people of my neighborhood had the custom of hunting armadillos, and I also liked to hunt these animals through the woods. As I worked at that time in a company in the center of the city in the day, so when I could, I only hunted the armadillos at night time. And to begin my account is that one day, I was walking on foot on a dirt road, and that's when I saw a friend of mine, who was called Chico, at the entrance of his ranch. This acquaintance of mine called me to talk a little, and then I asked him if this friend of mine has been hunting for these days. And this, Chico told me that he went hunting armadillos at night a few days ago, and it was there that he saw a strange man walking through the woods. This friend of mine was afraid because he realized that this strange man hid behind some trees and kept watching him, and as Chico had no shotgun to defend himself, and I also did not know the intention of this suspicious guy, my colleague said, who left that place, and did not even want to know what this man was doing for the forest, and the Chico said that he would only return to hunt at night when he had some shotgun. However, me talking to him, we ended up scoring, going at night together to catch armadillos in the bush, and so I would take my father's shotgun. Well, one weekend evening, I took my father's car. I went to pick up Chico at his house to go hunting together, and soon after I went to his residence, Chico took his dog Hunter along with us, and so, after we drove through some dirt streets, which was a very dark place that region because of the woods. After about 15 minutes of driving on the road, we arrived at the site to hunt the armadillos, and it was 9 p.m. Well, as soon as we got out of the car, a suspicious man passed by the road. At this time, my friend Chico said that for sure, it was this man who was passing in the street, who he had seen the other day walking through the woods, hiding behind the trees. The fact is that this guy passed us, and he looked at my shotgun, but strangely the dog of Chico got out of control and wanted to attack this guy anyway. We held the dog, and after that, the guy continued to walk down the road and disappeared. After this suspicious man left, we went hunting through the woods, and what happened is that we had not been able to hunt anything, and it was a few hours, and my friend told me to go to another place to see if there were some armadillos there. I agreed to go along with him, hunt in another place. Soon I already started my car, and we went to this other forest. Anyway, as soon as we got to this other place, we started to go after the armadillos. While we walked through the vegetation, we arrived at a point where there were some trees, and with the light of the lantern, we saw some clothes on the floor, and looking better than shirt and pants, my friend told me that this outfit was the suspicious subjects which we saw walking on the road when we arrived to hunt. And looking closer, I also recognized that those clothes on the floor were that guy's. We found it very strange that man had left his clothes thrown around, and with that, we gave up hunting and decided to leave and return to our neighborhood because we did not know what this guy was up to in the woods, and sure enough, this guy was doing wrong things in this place. At that, we took the path and went back to our car, and while we were walking in that darkness of the thicket, our dog began to get nervous, and he stopped and kept barking towards some bushes that he had nearby. My friend even thought it was some armadillo, and then when he went to those bushes to look around, at that moment we had a surprise, for a black figure of a large animal came out from within that vegetation and advanced on top of my friend Chico, my colleague, and that beast rolled on the ground, and that animal growled very angrily. I was frightened by it, but it was very dark. I took the flashlight and threw the light on top of the quarrel of the two, and I was startled by what I saw, because what was on top of my partner was a huge and very weird creature. The dog even advanced on that animal, but this being did not even care about the dog, and it had a glint of light in its eyes, which were astonishing, and this animal tried to bite it fiercely. I saw danger. That animal smashed the Chico. I had to do something fast, but I did not risk it and shoot the beast, for I could hit the shot at my friend. But then, what I did was to shoot twice in the air, and it worked, because this beast came out of my partner's top, and that frightened creature, he ran on 4 legs and hid behind the tree. I loaded my gun, putting more ammunition into the shotgun, and passed the flashlight into the tree where the beast was hidden. I pointed the gun in the direction of the animal, but this creature got up and stood up in a position equal to a man, only on 2 legs, and stared at me, and of course, I pointed my gun at that monster. At that moment my friend Chico got up from the ground, and he told me that it was a werewolf, that animal. I just didn't shoot again, because I only had the 2 rounds in the gun. My friend held his dog, and we walked backwards, and that werewolf stared at me, and this creature to me was very intelligent, for sure. This werewolf knew what a firearm was, and so he didn't risk getting out from behind the tree, lest I shoot him. I kept walking backwards, and away from the beast, and with the lights of the lantern, I could still see the werewolf hiding behind the tree, and that werewolf was afraid to get out from behind the trunk of the tree, afraid that I would shoot him. The appearance of this creature was bizarre, for it looked like a large standing dog, and it also looked like an ape, and the body from the waist up was equal to that of a man, and from the waist down, it was the same legs of a dog, like crooked backwards. Anyway, as soon as we were a good distance away from this monster, he ran on 2 legs and standing, and entered the bushes and disappeared into the darkness. With that, we took advantage and ran away too, and at least the werewolf didn't chase us. Soon we got to my car, then I started the car, and we left that place. And driving my car, and going back to my neighborhood, I saw that my friend was injured, because the creature managed to bite his arm, and Chico and I agreed that this creature was a werewolf. Then I took the Chico to his house, and then I went to my house, and I didn't even sleep well that night. because of the fright and danger that we went through, because it was something unbelievable what we saw, and now I know for a fact that these creatures exist, and it is not only stories that the old people of the region told. But when the day dawned, I was still thinking about this creature, and also the danger of this monster walking in the nights in our region. And there were a lot of questions in this story, because I found the clothes of the wanderer thrown on the ground. Was that guy the werewolf, or was he attacked by the beast? I kept thinking about these matters. In this, I told this werewolf account of mine to all the folks who like to hunt, not to go in the evening after armadillos, and if they were going to hunt at night, at least take a gun. And then, I even tried to find that suspicious guy who walked past us, and who left his clothes thrown by the woods, but the fellow never saw him again. The other day, I went to my friend Chico's house to see how he was, and arriving at his house, I saw him with several bandages, because the werewolf managed to bite his arm, but his injuries were not serious. But I realized that his dog was trapped, and barked very angrily at the Chico, and my friend said he didn't understand why his dog wanted to attack him, and because of that, now he was arresting his dog. But the two of us talking, soon Chico told me something strange, and he told me that the suspicious man who left his clothes in the woods went to his house and talked a little with Chico, and this stranger warned him that Chico was cursed. The wanderer warned him to leave his family and to go live somewhere else, for now he was no longer considered human, and that he was now part of the world of the damned creatures. And the strange guy left him a phone number for Chico for him to receive further instructions and to know how to live as a beast of the night. Of course, for me, the so-called wanderer was the werewolf of the thicket. My friend Chico was worried about this matter, but he pretended that it was something impossible to happen of him becoming a werewolf, so he asked me not to tell anything to anyone in the neighborhood, because someone could kill him because of this story. After a few days, I returned to the house of my friend Chico, and his father told me that Chico went to work cutting cane in a city, in which he did not speak the name of that city, and that in a few months, he would return to our village. Anyway, I don't know if Chico became a werewolf and so he left, but the truth is that after he left town, he never came back, and his family didn't say anything more about Chico, and I don't know what happened to him, if Chico became a werewolf, or if he's still alive. Well guys, thanks for watching the story, and if you liked the video, give it a like, and also subscribe to our Midnight channel. Until the next horror story. Fear Zone, your channel of horror and werewolf stories. Good evening everyone, and now, let's go to today's report, which is from Mr. Elio, and this happened to him in the city of Moringa, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 2016, Mr. Elio was 27 years old. And today, I'm going to tell you something that I saw, that to me, it was definitely a werewolf, and it was hidden to try to attack me. And it all starts like this. I live in a village far from the city, but at that time, I worked as a mason's helper in a construction site near the city center. One day, after I finished my work hours, I went to a little bar, which was close to my neighborhood. I was there talking to a hillbilly friend of mine, but I ended up negotiating with this man for him to sell me one of his bicycles. The fact is that this redneck said that if I wanted, I could see your bikes right now. I agreed, because if the business went well, I would in the morning work with such a bike. Anyway, it was almost close to 11 o'clock at night, and I was walking on foot, along with this besieged friend of mine on the road, to be able to get to his place. While we were walking down the road, suddenly, we saw a car stopped in the middle of the dirt street, and then came down a strange guy from this car, and to me that vehicle was an Uber. that for me, the driver left that man there. And of course, I found this situation strange, because as someone, I would want to go down this dark road at this time. But soon, the Uber car was gone, and the stranger who got out of the car started walking down the dirt street, and this guy was walking looking towards the woods. But then this guy started to get sick and vomit on the ground. As soon as we passed near him, we asked if this guy was okay. The guy said everything was normal, and then he put his hands in front of his eyes. This guy seemed to hide his eyes from us, and he took a pair of glasses quickly in his pocket and put it on his face, and this man didn't want help, so I continued to walk down the road with my redneck friend, and the strange fellow stood on the road still vomiting. Anyway, that guy was very strange. I decided to look back, and I didn't see that suspect on the road anymore. But I looked into the woods and saw some bushes moving, and to me, even though I no longer saw the fellow of the road, it was surely he who had entered the midst of the thicket. I let it go, and my friend and I kept walking down the road, and after a few minutes we got to his place, so I made a deal with him and ended up getting his bike. After that, I got the bike and started walking down the road with her to go away to my house. But then I got to the road where I had seen this man who was vomiting, but this street was empty and with no one. Well, while riding the bike, all of a sudden, I saw something strange happening in a tree, because its branches started to move out of nowhere, and for me, there was someone up there. Even so, I was slowly passing by this tree to see what was on top of the branches, but there were many leaves on this tree, and you couldn't see anything. But it was that soon I heard a noise of branches breaking, and I saw something falling to the ground, and it made a noise, and I was startled by that. I don't know what it was, but it seemed to be an animal or a person who fell from the top of the tree. I stopped the bike to look a little, but a kind of black and hairy animal came out of the woods running on 4 legs, and came towards me at high speed. But lucky for me, I do not know what happened to this beast, which he tripped and fell to the ground growling in pain. I took advantage of this moment, and I didn't wait, and started pedaling the bike quickly to get away from this animal. While running with the bike, I heard some passing noises of that animal running after me, but soon also I heard a kind of a noise of tumbling on the ground, but I didn't even look back, so I could not lose the speed of the bike. At last, afterwards I realized that the animal was no longer behind me, for I no longer heard the noise of its footsteps, and with that I stopped to look at that animal, and was surprised by what I saw, for that beast was a huge and large animal, and could not see whether it was a dog or not. But the problem is that this creature was limping with its front paws, and sure enough he was injured by the fall of the tree, and luckily he could not catch me in the race. But something strange began to happen, for I was going to live now one of the greatest experiences that I have had in my life, but to make me even more shocked and very impressed, because the creature could not walk on 4 legs, this being stood up and stood still like people, balancing on 2 legs, as if it were a person, and I saw that his eyes looked like 2 lights on. At that moment, there was no doubt that this beast was a werewolf. I was very frightened by the appearance of this werewolf, and I pedaled fast with the bike from that place, and I went through several roads very scared. I kept riding the bike. I managed to get home. I explained to my brother and my father what I had and the danger I went through. I don't know if they believed me that I had seen a werewolf, but my father kept looking out the window to try to see something, but nothing appeared. Time went by, and I went to sleep. The other day too, I went to work normally, but my routine I changed, and I was no longer in the bars until night, because I did not want to take the risk to face the werewolf again. However, a month or so passed. I was already more relaxed with this werewolf story, but it was that one day, I went to a bar to drink and play billiards, and stayed late, and so, I looked at the street, and I saw this guy who threw up on the road. That day the werewolf ran after me, and this suspicious man passed in front of the bar, wherein I went to talk to him, to warn him of the creature of the road, and warn him not to walk the roads alone. Well, I talked to this man about the dangerous beast that attacked me, but at that moment, I saw that the arms of this guy was bandaged with bandages of bandage. At that instant came to me memories that I related this man with werewolf that attacked me, and that he could be the creature of the road. I was afraid of this situation, and after that conversation, the suspect also became suspicious of me, and he left and disappeared. As it was night, I ended up taking a bus to return to my house that day, for I would not risk walking down the road and run the risk of running into the werewolf, and even more so with that suspicious man who had his arms bandaged and walking through my village, for that was the track I had, that when the werewolf fell from the tree he injured his arm as well. And so those men were the werewolf. Anyway, after that day, until today, I haven't seen this guy around my village anymore, but one thing I know, werewolves exist and are violent and attack people. Good night. Well guys, thanks for watching the video, and if you liked the story,